Show them who we are.
We are talking Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This one again directed by Ryan Coogler. Now, the original Black Panther movie, I have to be honest with you, although I didn't mind it, I didn't love it. I did score it a 7 out of 10, but to be honest with you, I was probably a little bit generous with that one. Realistically, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 now. But having seen this one, the sequel to that, and obviously this one having to deal with the death of Chadwick Boseman, of course, the star of the original Black Panther, and having to kind of work that into this movie, it definitely has some more emotional impact in it. Now, the MCU as late has been, you know, on somewhat of a downward spiral, I would say. I'm a huge Marvel fan. I do like the MCU, but I will admit that the kind of Phase 4 entries have been middling at best, you might say, and that includes the Disney Plus shows. So, you know, I prefer the slightly more kind of serious tone. My favourite MCU movie is still Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So I was pleased that this movie dials down the kind of the silliness a little bit and has a little bit more of a dramatic tone, like similar to the kind of like the Winter Soldier and stuff. So the story of this one, really, this is going to be a non-spoiler review. I mean, the actual Black Panther character doesn't show up into the third act. So this is really a story of grief, dealing with obviously the loss of a family member, and also the kind of the story of essentially kind of warring nations. So this really feels more like a science fiction movie where we have, you know, two kind of fantasy nations that are ultimately kind of at war at some point. You know, there's an escalation, and then, you know, interwoven in all of that, you've got families kind of dealing with grief. So I found this movie, you know, it had some really kind of deep and interesting kind of themes in there, and I really enjoyed it. So let's just go into a little bit more detail about what I did like about this movie. I have to say, I think this is possibly down to the fact that obviously they lost Chadwick Boseman in real life, and obviously the cast were kind of expecting to work with him again. So you do get a palpable sense of the feels of this movie, because we do have that, you know, the movie kind of mirrors life in a way where we have the death of Black Panther, T'Challa, and then that kind of mirrors obviously the death of his actor Chadwick Boseman. So you get this funeral sequence at the beginning, and all throughout the movie this kind of touches upon again those feelings of kind of grief and having to kind of like accept it and kind of like, you know, be able to deal with it. So I thought that was very, very good in the movie, and I do feel it gave the movie some pathos, and I thought for the most part the performances here are all very good. You know, Letitia, Wright and Angela Bassett, I think, head up the cast really well as T'Challa's mother and sister, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting in regard to kind of acting ability and things like this. I have to say, I think this movie does benefit from having not a superhero in it, so to speak, until the end of the movie, really. I mean, we get Namor, who is obviously our kind of antagonist, and, you know, obviously the Atlanteans are kind of superpowered, but it feels more like a science fiction movie than a superhero movie, I would say, at least until the final act. And as for the kind of the Namor's people, I thought they were fantastically kind of realised. You know, we get a good idea of who they are, what they kind of stand for, their kind of reasons for doing what they're doing, you know, and the differences between Namor and his people. I thought that was all handled really well, and the guy who's, I won't pronounce his name, who plays Namor, or Namor as it's pronounced in this movie, I thought was very, very compelling, and gave, you know, again, a very kind of like, you know, a good villain, really, you know, a good kind of antagonist to this kind of, to the Wakandans, and really to the world, to be honest with you. I thought you know, the actual kind of the storyline here was you know, the movie wasn't always going to feature Namor as that kind of antagonist, but obviously they had to kind of pivot somewhat with the death of Chadwick Boseman. It gives it a much more of a mature storyline here. And I think there's some, the overall arc is very good in the week after the story, and I do think there's some personal moments in that as well with the individual kind of characters. I mean, arguably there might be a little bit too many characters to it in a way here, but I thought even some of the kind of the personal moments were very good. I thought the underwater sequences were well realised. They actually did use you know, water tanks and stuff, so that people are underwater and things like that, which gives it somewhat of a more realistic feel in a way, because it's very dark and, you know, we sort of see the people's faces underwater and stuff, so it looks a little more real than the shooting kind of dry for wet, which sometimes they kind of do. That was all pretty good. Yeah, the movie's a little long, I won't lie, but I thought it was, I was never bored within that. I thought it was entertaining, there was enough kind of going on. What didn't work for me, as I've said, there's maybe a few too many characters in this movie, to be honest. I thought the introduction of, the weakest part of the movie for me was probably Ironheart, who is a newer Marvel character. She was introduced after I'd stopped reading comics, and I thought her introduction seemed like almost like product placement for like kind of Disney Plus shows. She just seemed to be kind of jammed in there, as if to say, oh, what's this? Her own Disney Plus show, which is exactly what they were doing. I thought her introduction seemed kind of like, I don't know, to me it didn't really fit. It seemed kind of somewhat kind of clumsily kind of handled. And then towards the end, we do the kind of the big sort of CGI fight. I think it was better than a lot, certainly the previous kind of Black Panther movie. I was liking the fact that we actually have some kind of named characters outside of Namor for the kind of the Talohakans, whatever they're called. You know, we get Atuma and Namora as well, so you don't just get, you know, a load of kind of faceless kind of goons. We actually do have some characters, albeit they're, you know, don't get huge amounts of kind of dialogue or anything. But I quite like the fact that we get a couple of kind of like lieutenants in Namor's army as well. Yeah, I mean, there's like one or two times it looks a little bit kind of CGI at times, but you know, I think if I had the latter half, the latter third, sorry, is probably a little weaker. It falls a little bit back onto its kind of like MCU laurels, but it's still an entertaining movie. I don't think you can kind of completely kind of not have these kind of elements in a kind of an MCU movie. But I think this is a lot stronger than the original Black Panther movie, which to be honest with you, I've never revisited. And as I look back at that, I think maybe I was a little bit too kind with it. But this one I do think was a legitimately gripping story. I thought the performances were excellent. I thought the pathos was there, and I think the kind of the character arcs were very strong in the movie, and it ended in a really satisfying manner, I have to say, with a great end credit sequence. So this is a strong movie for me. A few little niggles. I would have liked them not to have Ironheart in this because I felt that was unnecessary, but ultimately still an excellent movie. I thought this was certainly probably one of the top Marvel movies for me. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.